The all-American nuclear family. Two parents with children. At its peak in terms of idealization in the 1950s, the nuclear family has been a mainstay for centuries. So often when we talk about the nuclear family, it evokes images of a doting wife, a loving stay-at-home mother, and a hard-working father attempting to provide for his family. It looks blissful and ideas sold from generations before that a life like this is the perfect life. But has it always been this way? And why are all these people on the subreddit coming out of the woodwork now? Today we'll be sifting through historical reports and studies on the two-person nuclear family structure, why modern parents today are unhappy, and what the crux of the issue might be for people in this camp. But first, let me take you through the history of the nuclear family structure. The nuclear family has been around since at least the 13th century, beginning in England. This was in contrast to cultural norms observed in Southern Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, where young couples typically lived with or close to their families. English societal expectations dictated that they create their own households, so marriage often occurred later in life in order to save money to establish their own homes. By the time these couples were ready to marry, their parents had usually passed away, so there weren't many households with multiple generations living together. And from then on, this was mostly the norm in the West, though other cultural norms have changed in many ways. For instance, the 17th century family more commonly had live-in servants and apprentices to help with the household, which weren't exactly distinguished as separate from the family. And even in the 18th century, it was more common for people to refer to their entire households as family, whether biological or not. These live-in servants and maids were much more common than they are today. Many middle-class families had them, and they were essential to running a household. Many believe that the decline of live-in help was solely due to modern convenience or technological progress, but that would only be the smallest piece of the puzzle. The major drop-off in live-in servants actually didn't occur until after World War II, when the number of stay-at-home moms increased. This was due to the economic boom after which a family could survive comfortably on a single income. Moms could stay at home. In 1940, the Bureau of Labor Statistics recorded 2.6 million employed domestic servants, almost one job in 20. Now, cleaners, cooks, and others working in private homes account for less than one job in 145. But now we fast forward to 1950s America, where the nuclear family structure had its heyday. And it's always kind of confused me how this came to be. The rise of the American nuclear family structure took off at this time for a few different reasons. This was post-World War II. There was an economic boom, a baby boom, and a general optimism for the future.
The SS Monterey arrives in New York Harbor with 6,500 members of the famed Timberwolf or 104th Division. These men fought from the beaches of Normandy to cross the Rhine at Remagen under the leadership of General Terry Allen. They have carved a niche in military history and in the hearts of proud Americans.
After the ravages of war, soldiers were looking to come home, get married, and start a happy family. Around 13 million homes were built during the time, and families moved to the suburbs because they could afford to. It was a new beginning not just for post-war America, but for young people coming into their own as well. Now this idea of the woman staying home to cook and clean and care for the children while the man goes off to work and make the money has mainly died off. It's now not even a feasible idea for most people, considering now you need two incomes to even attempt to buy a home. The market now reflects two-person income households. But what happens when you add another person to the mix? Well, what happens when you add two extra people? What if they're children, completely dependent on you in terms of provision? There's now two people working, so that means the child needs to be sent off to daycare. But it's an unfortunate reality that childcare costs just seem to keep rising. In fact, childcare prices are rising faster than all other products according to the Consumer Price Index. I know a few families myself who you would think would be able to afford childcare, struggling to find affordable prices. Now this could be for a few different reasons. Maybe they just hate working for a corporation, or maybe they want to bond with their child more, or maybe they just can't afford childcare.
My husband, with his job, he's the breadwinner. So I would have to be the one that stays at home.
The average cost of childcare in the U.S. now tops $10,000 a year for one child. That's more than in-state college tuition in dozens of states.
And of course, when you're forced into the situation of one person supplying the income for 3 or more individuals, quality of life goes significantly downhill, as well as marital satisfaction. In fact, looking at this graph, which displays a few different studies on marital satisfaction after having children, shows there is a very strong decline, which only goes back up after the kids are out of the house. And this shouldn't be new to anyone. Looking at the perspective of many women, many complain that despite working full-time, they still feel that they shoulder a majority of the household duties, leaving them exhausted and burnt out.
Day in the life of a childless woman. The point is to make you feel good about being an aging, deeply unlikable woman who never had kids.
People decide to be child-free for a lot of reasons, but let me give you some specific examples straight from my comment section. While in excruciating pain from a kidney infection, my husband came to me to ask if dinner would be ready by 7. I told him if he wants to cook it. He proceeded to make only himself eggs. P.S. We have 3 children ages 6 and under. My mom was out of town and my dad claimed to not know how to put on sheets or start the dishwasher. The day after I came home from a C-section with a catheter still in from a bladder repair, I was the one making dinner while my husband was on his Xbox. I was in the hospital recovering from having cancer removed from my body. My ex-husband went and played basketball. Our neighbor talked him into visiting me at the hospital because cancer. He argued with me about when I was coming home to take care of the kids.
Many complain that household chores and child-rearing responsibilities aren't equal, which is supported by studies like this one. According to the data, the total number of hours spent working, paid and unpaid, for wives is roughly 74 hours. For husbands, it's 51 hours. I myself understand why women would decide not to have children based on this. They have to work a full-time job, take care of the children, and on top of all that, still do a majority of the household duties. There still seems to be relics of previous generational norms seeping into modern marriages. It is still fairly new that women are in the workforce and taking on the same responsibilities and leadership roles as men. I suspect this imbalance will level out as time progresses and new habits form. Coming into the digital age, we see a massive shift in how motherhood, fatherhood, and parenting is viewed. Many who would not admit it before can now feel the freedom to admit it anonymously online, that they regret parenthood. The regretful parenthood subreddit and the child-free subreddit have taken off. And though some may say both subreddits are toxic, in some of the more heartfelt posts, I can see where they're coming from. A lot of people on there just seem to want to be heard. For the regretful parent subreddit, either they were coerced into parenthood through cultural norms, baby trapping, or they just weren't properly informed how hard parenthood really is, or whatever it might be. There's a wealth of information on there that is pretty valuable. And as far as the child-free subreddit, there is still definitely a stigma towards women who specifically choose to not have kids. Many call them selfish and lazy, that they're too masculine, or that they're wasting their lives by not wanting kids. But I see a lot of people who made a decision that they felt was right for themselves and stuck with it rather than being coerced into something they didn't really want. Looking at the regretful parent subreddit, you can get an idea of the sort of posts that rank the highest. Many complain of the cost of raising a child, which is roughly $332,000 up until the age of 18, according to the USDA data and inflation statistics from the BLS. And everyone knows that money in a lot of ways equals freedom. If you have money, you can hire help. You can hire someone to clean or cook or help with childcare. This is a very understated and valid reason for the stress parents today face. It makes me wonder how the Kardashians like Kim or Kylie can have 2 to 4 children and still be able to keep up with their careers and make appearances. Come to find out, they actually have several nannies on rotation. I believe Kim has 6. So they get all the joys of raising a child without the real struggle that comes with it.
Kim's nanny and I had a little disagreement when we were away traveling together, but I haven't really spoken to Kim about it, so I want to see what's going on. She said that she felt so degraded by you and you just started yelling at her.
Oh my
and you
God.
said, keep your voice down.
She's lying.
A lot of people on the subreddit explained that they didn't know what they were getting themselves into, that they were just following the life script. The loss of independence, peace, money, and marital satisfaction is just too much. Looking at this post, we can see that not only is it the cost that matters, but the feeling of being hoodwinked. Many claim the joys of motherhood or fatherhood rise above any hardship endured, which may be true for some, but there are real struggles that should be discussed. Phrases like, you can have a fulfilling career or life and have kids, may be true for some, but that's not the case for all. And phrases like, it's different when it's your own child, is not always the case for all people. It's important to have these conversations, especially educational ones, before someone decides to have children, because there's no going back. And it honestly baffles me that this isn't talked about more, especially in schools. Parenting is not for everyone, and not everyone is suited for it. So much trauma could be avoided if this simple fact was talked about more, that you don't have to have children. This is even more apparent when acknowledging that in some countries, non-parents have a higher life satisfaction compared to parents. A recent study looked at life satisfaction in 22 different Western countries. In some places, parents are happier than people without children. The study suggests that being unhappy as a parent isn't the same everywhere and isn't always the norm. In certain countries like Norway and Hungary, parents actually feel happier than those without kids. This is also true for parents in Portugal, Finland, Sweden, and Spain. However, in one particular highly developed Western country, parents aren't as happy as non-parents. Can you guess which one? It's the US. Out of the 22 countries in the study, American parents are the least happy compared to non-parents. Even accounting for things like wealth, family size, and expected levels of happiness, the results remain largely the same. Yet, according to Jennifer Glass, who led the study and is a sociologist at the University of Texas at Austin, two main things affect why American parents are less happy compared to parents in other countries. First, childcare for a 2-year-old is very expensive in the US. Second, Americans get fewer paid vacation and sick days each year. Unlike other wealthy countries, the US doesn't do much to help parents with these costs or to make it easier for them to balance work and childcare. So it seems that this cause of unhappiness could be distilled down to a lack of freedom. If one parent is forced to stay home to care for the child rather than working towards their career, that can feel depleting. If a parent finds it difficult to take off work to enjoy time with the children without a cut to their pay, that can be depleting as well. Unfortunately, a lot of these topics aren't discussed beforehand. Most ask, when are you going to have kids? And if the response is, I'm not going to, it's met with, oh, you'll change your mind. The thing is, everyone is individual. Just because a certain decision was the best for one person doesn't mean that decision will be the best for another person. And the regretful parent subreddit is a perfect example of that.